Hello, I'm glad to be part of the online Critical Costume 2020 conference, and as chair of the network, I'm also pleased that we have succeeded in holding the event in this virtual form, though we do miss our face-to-face interactions and the common space for direct dialogue, which we hope to have at the working groups. Let me share some accompanying text. My presentation is entitled Costume Thinking as a Strategy for Critical Thinking. I will use the opportunity offered by this video presentation to discuss with you a term that I first presented in my opening talk at Critical Costume 2015 in Helsinki, though there I didn't have the space to elaborate upon it. The term was also introduced in my editorial for the first issue of the journal Studies in Costume and Performance in 2016, following the event. I'm referring to the term costume thinking, which I have often used since then in my teaching and research as a way to indicate, in short, that costume makes us think in open ways, taking a critical stance. My presentation invites to think not simply about costume, but about what we can do with costume and through costume by proposing costume as a lens for developing a critical theoretical discourse that derives from its practice. This is not a research paper that is ready for conclusions yet. In fact, it's a provocation, a presentation that aims at inviting to discuss, debate, and reflect on the practice and agency of costume and on the process of costume designing as critical practice. I recently read in a colleague's text that the meaning of the term costume is elusive. I do believe that we've done a lot to identify the context and dynamics of costume, continuously building towards a field of critical costume studies. In our editorial for the launch issue of Studies in Costume and Performance, entitled Towards a Philosophy of Costume, Donatella Barbieri and myself admitted that the field of costume has suffered from a lack of clarity, which has hindered early scholarship on the subject. Yet, when clarifying costume as a preparation of the performer specifically for performance, whether on a traditional stage, screen, or the street, we can clearly see how costume engages the analysis of the social, cultural, and political frames of reference implicit to its various geographical and historical contexts. Costume also speaks to multiple and interdisciplinary starting points, ones that are not only performance-centered, historical, dramaturgical, and socio-cultural, but that can be addressed through theoretical frames provided by specific readings of anthropology, phenomenology, cognition, and psychology. This can be a starting point for our discussion. Rachel Hahn and Sitzel Beth have defined costume as a means of critically interrogating the body. By definition, the body is at the center of costume research, as costume is defined and completed by a symbiosis with the performing body. In recent years, coinciding with the material, embodied, and other cultural terms that have highlighted new ways of thinking through culture, costume has been reconnected in new and exciting ways to theories of the body and embodiment, wider design practices, including process studies, co-design, and other forms of collaboration, networks of creativity, renewed practical and theoretical studies of artistic creation, and developments in teaching and learning in international educational settings. Costume is continually appreciated as an area of dynamic social significance and not simply as a passive reflector of a preconceived social state or practice. Designing costume is not seen anymore as being in service of performance making in a subordinate role, but rather as a central contributor to an often renewed sense of collaborative collective practice, proposing new directions in turn to the making of performance itself. As Hilary Baxter noted, costume is generative rather than reactive or responsive. Then costume becomes a catalyst as well as a subject and object of study. Therefore, costume design is both a practice and a means of representation with historical, cultural, social, pedagogical, communicative, political, and somatic dimensions, and embodies narratives for self-representation. As such, costume shapes new representations of humanity, functioning as a tool for learning and social integration, affecting social change, while also generating ambiguity, going beyond conventional formats of race, gender, and sexuality, and becoming in turn a tool for active participation, emancipation, and self-exploration. Therefore, thinking on costume practice expands beyond storytelling and addresses substantial characteristics of life within diverse social frames. It involves understanding and accepting others' personalities, practicing empathy and observation, improving interpersonal and intercultural communication. Such an approach is not only relevant to performance and fiction, but can be applied to everyday situations as a way to think actively about the human element, its appearance and expression. So designing for the body in performance invites a posing of questions on social, political, gender, and other ethical as well as philosophical perspectives related to the representation of the human element, or more widely, investigating and conceptualizing even the non-human or the post-human. All this belongs to the process of designing costume, which allows a questioning of established notions, enabling new approaches and proposing new definitions. This, I argue, comes with the process of thinking that is integral to designing costume. Costume designer Maija Pekkanen has noted, in our everyday work, we, costume designers, must change our point of view and find new ways to solve problems. Costume design offers us a wide range of models to think with. Thinking, after all, is the most important tool in creative work. Thinking through costume here is not about the costume as a physical garment, but about the process of thinking involved in the conceptualization of costume. While costume remains a critical part of the actor's performance, it does not only enable thinking about performance, but provides a wider set of tools to think about the human element and beyond. As a human-centric approach, the concept of costume thinking is close to design thinking, but much wider, as, unlike design thinking, it does not only relate to problem solving. Costume thinking focuses on the subject, what actions and ideas are entailed, what aims are to be reached, and not the object, the costume itself. Let's have a look at the term critical. By going back to the Greek original word, the term derives from the ancient Greek verb krinin, which signifies to separate, decide, judge, as well as to evaluate. From this derives the ancient Greek word kritikos, which means of or for judging, able to discern, able to make judgments. It is important to note that there is no predisposed negative connotation to the original term, which shows that situations and conditions are open for debate and especially for evaluation. The term was borrowed by Latin as criticus, meaning a judge, a censor, an estimator, and at a turning point, decisive. With the addition of the prefix "a", the term critical passed on to the Anglo-Saxon world, meaning to express an opinion or judgment about something or someone. However, this inclined to criticizing severely and unfavorably, implying giving a negative opinion. The term also addresses something that is decisive, extremely serious or dangerous, and of the greatest importance to the way things might happen. Through reflecting on the original meaning of the word, we see that it actually involves careful judgment or judicious evaluation of things and situations without preconceived views on the final decision. This is the core of openness that leads to critical thinking. Critical thinking entails the ability to step back from one's own thinking perspective and honestly evaluate whether something is sound, rational, and unbiased. It has been defined as the intellectual discipline process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and/or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. In its exemplary form, it is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter divisions: clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reasons, depth, breadth, and fairness. Critical thinking entails the examination of those structures or elements of thought implicit in all reasoning: purpose, problem, or question at issue, assumptions, concepts, empirical grounding, reason leading to conclusions, implications and consequences, objections from alternative viewpoints, and frame of reference. Costume thinking is responsive to subject matter, issues, and purposes. It relates to context in ways that are similar to working with costume in performance, and it's also incorporated in a family of interwoven modes of thinking. Among them, scientific thinking, mathematical thinking, historical thinking, anthropological thinking, economic thinking, moral thinking, and philosophical thinking. So here, costume thinking offers a human-centered approach that adds to our exploration of the human condition from a critical perspective. What shifts when we analyze costume using these tools? What is the aim of costume thinking? Is it to become a more empathetic or a more observant designer? Or is the aim more metaphysical and philosophical? How does it relate to practice? To view how costume is able to contribute to critical thinking, I intend to return to the core of costume, its design practice. Through research in costume design, we are in a position to influence how we think about people through costume and with costume, not only in relation to the past, but looking at the future. Let's have a look at the terms relating to research in and through arts practice by investigating some specific approaches and the related terminology. So arts-related research is the wider field of our work, which takes distinct forms and is used in diverse arts contexts. It's about creating, examining, and interpreting art in ways that illustrate both the artistic process and the impact of the arts. Contemporary research has developed methods for arts-based research, for the systematic use of the artistic process, the actual making of artistic expressions, as a primary way to understand and examine experience by both researchers and the people that they involved in their studies. While arts-led research is concerned with the nature of the art field and leads to new knowledge about the nature of the arts that has operational significance for the specific field of art. How could these terms be applied to costume? In my research recently within the Costume Methodologies Research Project, I have worked on developing the terms through the prism of costume to identify and frame the type of work that we all do. So we work in costume-related research, which is research about costume. It involves the expression of theoretical and philosophical considerations in relation to costume, body, design, and performance. Our costume-based research concerns researching through costume by producing new creative costume work, which acts as a form of research. There, costume as a creative artifact is the basis of the contribution to knowledge, whereas costume-led research is research on and of costume, leading primarily to wider new understandings about costume. Therefore, here, costume practice leads to research insights, concepts, and theorization on a broader level. I'm in a process of articulating these research lenses and terms further, and for this, I present them here in relation to the concept of costume thinking. Researching with costume, costume-based, and through costume, costume-led, invites new ideas for the conceptualization of costume and following for the conceptualization of the human element. So, costume thinking is not about costume or design as much as about critical thinking through costume. It is a means to articulate the ways in which costume becomes a tool for analysis, negotiation, communication, experimentation, and expression of ideas and behaviors. Beyond designing for the body, costume thinking addresses the philosophical dimension of human existence and the ways in which costume creates space for critical thinking. Our most important challenge today is to understand the potential of costume, its material or immaterial, communicative and performative agency for future representations of human and non-human existence. Let's not forget that new technological tools enable new types of body, for example, dissolving bodies, in which the physical borders of the human body blend together with digital and virtual non-human elements. To conclude, the aim of my presentation has been to unlock notions of conceptualization of costume and its thinking process. Not only what costume is and what costume does, but also how costume can be approached, how it can be thought of, working towards a deeper understanding of its role, function, agency, and potential as a strategy for critical thinking, inviting to rethink the human element anew. Costume thinking is therefore proposed as a strategy not only to design for the human body, but as a way to explore the human element through critical thinking in performance, as well as beyond the concept of performance. So I offer the term costume thinking to our discussion, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.